City Builders, the ultimate kind of Zen game. Nothing puts you at peace of mind like constructing a well-functioning, efficient machine, and a planned cityscape is the biggest mechanism we can create, at least at the time of this video's release. It's been a favorite genre of mine for a long time. My cousins introduced me to Zeus as a child, and the gameplay loop is so addictive and pleasant that I often end up wasting hours on end. And speaking of Zeus, today I'm joined by another aficionado of this particular game about constructing ancient metropolitan areas, Playhead North, from the channel of the same name. Say hi!
Hi, I'm Playhead North. I have a YouTube channel where I ostensibly talk about video games, and also post my weird fan music. I followed ToDoWeDo on Twitter, and I noticed one day that he posted about Zeus being a really influential game for him. Zeus, as it turns out, is probably one of my all-time favorite games. While I know that Zeus was a popular game in the early 2000s, as were the other Impressions games that had a huge impact on city builders as a genre, I played Zeus as a literal child when it came out. As a girl child in the early 2000s, I perhaps somewhat unsurprisingly didn't know anyone else who played this game. So seeing that ToDoWeDo also played Zeus and that it also made an impression on him, I got excited and said, hey, if you want to make a collab video about Impressions games sometime, let me know. And like a naive child, he agreed.
You admit to being of a similar age as me later on in this very video, how dare you? You might have bullied me if we were both of school age due to the gap, but now we're both old here, so the gap doesn't matter anymore. You have no power.
Oh, my sweet summer child. I can also edit the script, and I still have 3 years on you.
But yeah, I did. The best way to create content is to just stick your face on top of a hot stove, my mama used to say. But before we get to that, a short personal history of mine. I was never a fan of modern city builders, he said, having played City Skylines for almost 12 hours straight right before starting the script. Not that there's anything wrong with SimCity or its imitators, but they always felt samey to me. These cities are based on locomotion by car, making traffic the biggest concern, and work on zoning gameplay laws, which, by the way, is an extremely America-centric take on building cities in modernity, but regardless. My love for the genre is concentrated on the titles made by Impression games, each depicting a different antique civilization, its approach to building big cities, unique challenges it faced, and so on. There are common elements, but not enough for the games to feel repetitive if you play them all. We'll go through them in a semi-chronological, a kinda thematic order. First of all, Caesar 3, the one about Rome, a third entry in the series of this. Why number 3? Because it's building upon ideas from 1 and 2, and 4 is a horrible mess that went into 3D only to constrict you to a patch of land smaller than $1 million condo in California, making it feel like a camp builder more than a city builder. It goes on a huge sale on GOG regularly for a reason. This game fucking blows, but let's stay positive. Since I forced you to play it, what are your thoughts on C3, North?
Why are people in this game Scottish? I know that sounds like a joke, but in all seriousness, the voice acting in this game is odd. It follows the old American trope of, if you live in Europe, you must talk with a British accent, regardless of whether you're speaking, say, Latin, because you're Roman, and you live in ancient Rome, before Great Britain even really existed.
Aye boss, but that makes some sense if you think about it. Rome boys were a culture wow, paying a tribute to the green souls of theirs is good. The Brit boy account was the only way to go.
But in all seriousness, I actually liked playing this game. It's fairly simplistic. You build houses and citizens move in. You build facilities to maintain the houses and other buildings, as well as provide the citizens with amenities that will convince them to upgrade their houses to allow more people to move in. Workers are needed to run the other buildings, so whatever industries you want to create, you have to make sure that they aren't too far away from the citizens' houses, though often being too close will decrease the appeal of the area for new people moving in. Having played Zeus, this local workers requirement was new to me because this was a mechanic they removed in the later games. As such, there is some challenge to the city planning here that I had to get used to, even if, admittedly, there isn't a lot of challenge to it.
Yeah, this kind of approach is also seen in Pharaoh, but it's kind of funny because the games don't actually check if the workers actually live near the industry. All it needs is a house nearby to ping the thing. So building a tiny slum next to the undesirable part of the city is the way to go usually. I get they were trying to portray social strata somewhat, but it's so easy to cheese that my society always ends up something like 90% patricians, keeping a small minority of impoverished pox victims around to keep the economy running.
The game teaches you all of this in a series of missions, the first of which forces you to watch this animation of a building burning down before it will let you build prefectures that stop fires. I literally cackled when this happened. I don't know what that says about me. Probably nothing good. These missions slowly ramp up in terms of difficulty that make learning the game pretty straightforward, though there isn't a ton of variety to the missions. I like the idea of following Rome as it slowly builds and expands, but the goals of each mission are basically the same. You have a population number goal, a culture number goal, a try not to make Caesar hate you too much number goal, etc. These numbers change based on the mission, but the only one I consistently found challenging to meet was the population goal. It's often easy to breeze right past the other goals, but severely lag on population. Since you have to juggle reaching that population goal with providing your citizens with jobs, because if unemployment rises too high, your people freak out and start robbing your tax collectors, that means I found myself often building pointless workshops that I didn't want or need just to keep the rabble employed.
Too many workers? Demolish a house and build a tax collector office in its place. That will teach him. And I agree with the part about watching the empire expand. The same applies to Pharaoh and Emperor. Due to the missions being set in a chronological order, you can watch the borders on the world map expand and shrink. I was never good with dates when it comes to history, so this really made me appreciate just how long that period of history was and how much we actually know about it. Enough to make a game like this. And because each mission gives you different resources and terrain to work with, you need to think about that. This is an aspect I really miss in modern city builders. They are built around a sandbox approach, meaning I always have access to all the tools, and it makes me end up doing the same things out of habit, or similar things at least. I need limitations put on me to get creative, as sad as that may sound. That said, yeah, the goals of the game are mostly abstract and centered around keeping several trackers high enough. Never quite feels like the place you are currently building is that unique because of that.
I guess this segues into the other complaints I have about the game. For example, it's a little tricky to figure out how much of a good you actually have, since the system tracks goods in bulk but not in actual numbers. So sometimes you'll see on the advisor panel that you have 0 furniture, but then you literally look down and see a storehouse with furniture. It's odd. And once you acquire a good, there are limited ways to use it. It's very easy to start drowning in a good, especially if you too build pointless workshops just to keep the rabble employed.
You literally need to engage in regularly burning down your own warehouses to not drown in excess pottery you have no way of exporting. It's really peculiar and hurts my brainworms a lot, but I guess real-world companies engage in similar bullshit, so it's not entirely out of place.
There is combat, but combat is extremely simplistic. You recruit men, you stick them in front of the enemy men, you watch their morale because they're very skittish. That's pretty much it. And the gods in this game are the worst. You have to balance building temples to a variety of gods in the Roman pantheon. If you build a bunch, they might bless you in ways that are pretty much useless. But if you forget to build them, which is really easy to do, eventually the gods get mad. And not even mad in an interesting way. They just send you a scroll that says, "Hey, where's my temple? Oh, nowhere? Then let me kill your soldiers. Mwahahaha." That's an accurate impression of Mars, by the way. Just so you know, like 100% accurate. Exactly how he sounds in the game. But all that being said, I still had fun. It's a pretty straightforward game, but that also makes it pretty zen to me. I can passively grow my city while watching Motherland Fort Salem, and what more can a person really ask for than that?
It's a really chill game, and I appreciate the little things that make spawning cities in it unique compared to other titles by the company. It's Rome, so of course you gotta plan your water distribution by building aqueducts and reservoirs, or how the granaries are built on the crossroads, becoming the central point between districts. Lots of fun stuff like that. But ultimately it was built upon in the next title by Impression, Pharaoh and its expansion pack Cleopatra. Moving down to the Nile River, it reframes a lot of issues present in Caesar to a new environment. Can't get water out in the desert, so you gotta build a city close to the River of Gods itself. Can't get any farming done on sand, so all farms exist on floodplains that need to be harvested and collected before the flood comes in. And then there's the brand new mechanic of the thing ancient Egypt is best known for, humongous structures to keep your dead people in. Which I personally consider to be a pain because it tends to take up so much time that I just watch the structure get completed long after I finished all my other goals for the city. But still, I think this is the title that I come back to the most. There is something nice about the cyclical nature of the year and how you gotta keep track of not just food production, but stores for the year, as well as the idea of having this big project you need to work towards from the very start of the city, even if it can drag. How did you find it?
In a lot of ways, Pharaoh feels more like an advanced version of Caesar, since it includes most of the same mechanics but with these twists. The limited areas for building water distribution structures in particular makes planning the cities probably the most challenging of the Impressions games, especially if you do not want to be a cruel overlord and create slums. I think it's super neat that the devs incorporated the very real way that Egyptians farmed by relying on the flooding of the Nile into the game mechanics. But that also means you are very tied to one area of the map, and I often struggled to figure out what to do with the large sections of land that were far away from the Nile, given that I like gentrifying all of my cities, and therefore don't like using the slums hack.
It's especially frustrating when you have to mine your own stuff for the structures too. Sandstone and such are always located far away from the Nile, so you gotta spread out while still keeping your metropolis close to the water. I appreciate this giving a full context to how unreasonable all these pyramids and mastabas are though, the kind of unreasonable that made them lasting symbols of the culture across millennia.
At the same time, I don't think the population goals in Pharaoh are quite as ridiculous as in Caesar, so I found there to be more of a feeling of organically growing your city, as opposed to just throwing together suburbs for the purpose of pleasing your ruler. And I do agree that while the building projects are often slow, they add another dimension to the game that feels really lacking in Caesar by comparison. In addition, of all the Impressions games, I found the economy to be the least breakable in Pharaoh, as in I was the least likely to be hilariously loaded while playing Pharaoh. This is probably at least partially because the building projects tend to be pretty expensive.
The requests for resources are much more common as well. Oftentimes the game expects you to start producing your local products before even establishing a stable population base, which, again, says a lot about the historical context of these things. It's neat, but boy can it drive me up the wall. Oh yeah, Pharaoh, I can get you a full warehouse of limestone while my population eats nothing but fish balls? Sure!
However, a lot of my same complaints from Caesar also apply to Pharaoh. The inventory management system can be confusing, and there is still no way to get rid of excess goods.
You need to transfer food from granaries to warehouses for it to count for export, which I always found hilarious. Oh yeah, these huge warehouses made specifically for food doesn't count for the food tally, sorry.
Combat is pretty boring. The gods continue to be the worst, though in this case one of them sent a plague of frogs because I forgot to worship them, and I honestly found it more hilarious than anything. The frogs are weirdly cute. I also find it a bit odd that Pharaoh requires that a number of the important structures be built at intersections. Because keeping up the city requires walking citizens to visit certain buildings, and these walking citizens randomly choose which way they'll walk at given intersections, the more intersections you have, the more likely it is that those walking citizens will choose to take completely useless paths. Plus, the festival grounds being this large but eerily vacant plaza is creepy. I fully acknowledge this last one is not a legitimate complaint.
Nah, I agree. The festival square is stupid, and the fact you need to spend 500 monies on an empty eyesore to throw festival is stupid. We already have artists performing on every corner. Stop calling me an anti-fun governor because I don't want to build a lifeless plaza that even beggars don't want to hang out in unless I say God will be happy if we drink some beer there. Come on.
Overall, I'd say that this is a more difficult game, but in some ways less zen game than Caesar, simply because I still don't entirely have a handle on the best way to go about city planning. If you could raise the frogs to be pets, though, this would be a 15 out of 10 game.
Funnily enough, it's the one I return to the most, as mentioned before. Maybe it's the structures after all. There is also an expansion, Cleopatra, but all the mechanical changes it offers were rolled back to the main game, and the campaign is just more missions. Though I do find it pretty funny that the last stretch of it is building Alexandria from ground up several times, with only the mega structures carrying over. Now, we're getting to the one game we both hold near and dear to our hearts, Zeus, Master of the Olympus, and its expansion, Poseidon. My boy Hades didn't get his chance until 2020, and then they still made him the villain of the story, SMH. Zeus was a very specific swerve compared to the previous games. The history of Greek polis is not exactly riveting, because they were naturally, well, empires. Oh, now you're playing as Athens, you need to prevent Diogenes from masturbating in the public square, oh! So instead of that, they went with the mythological approach. Reenacting myths with your cities existing to attract and provide support to the heroes and deities that walk the Hellenic earth, either showering you with blessings or wrecking your day. So tell me, North, why is this game so near and dear to you?
My parents gave me Zeus soon after it came out in 2000. In writing this part of the script, I asked my dad out of curiosity if he could remember why he bought me Zeus. He couldn't, unfortunately. But my guess is it was based on the fact that my favorite computer game at the time was another semi-famous building game from the same time period, Roller Coaster Tycoon. Zeus turned out to be a good buy. Building game plus mythology equaled one very happy little child. I even distinctly remember having, I kid you not, a crush on Apollo because he was the pretty boy god in the game. This is extra hilarious because in Greek mythology, Apollo is often the worst. Although to my young self's credit, I still think he's one of the most helpful gods in the Zeus game. When the Poseidon expansion came out a few years later, my parents also bought it for me, and then used Poseidon as an incentive to make me work on a big school project that I really did not want to do. Thanks, Mom and Dad! I don't think that Zeus is an especially difficult game, but I did have trouble mastering it as a kid, which I think makes sense, particularly since I did not have cousins to teach me how to play it. So I spent years basically growing into and growing up with Zeus. I don't even know how many hundreds of hours I've logged in the game. I've completed all of the missions at least 3 times each by now. Zeus is just one of those games that, beyond generally being a fun zen city builder, is comfort media for me. What about you, To-Do-We-Do?
For me, it was my cousins, also around the game's release. I was 7 in 2000, so I'm pretty sure I played it then or soon after. Just watched them play it, said it looks cool, because let's be honest, when you're 7, everything your older but still underage family does is the coolest shit. They sat me down in front of the PC and taught me. It helped that the game got localized to Polish, unlike many others, so I actually could get a hang of it without constant helicoptering. It was the first game of that kind I've ever played, but it was intuitive and well explained enough for a literal child to get a hang of it. And if you're not doing well, here's cheat codes, they said. I really think that helped me stick through and form some of more niche tastes I have. Cheat codes getting phased out of the general gaming sphere is a grand tragedy for kids, and I am not even a bit ironic when I say that. Zeus is probably the biggest reason why I had good grades from history when we discussed ancient Greece in primary school, and why they plummeted right as we went on to the medieval period and Polish history. I've played through it dozens of times, including the expansions, missions and free build alike, and because I always had the CD and it was light, it often was the first thing to get installed. Especially when I was 15, and my parents decided to move into the middle of a forest with no internet options aside from 3G routed from a phone connected to a PC by a USB cable. Mom, Dad, I love you, but what the fuck? I swear, if not for Zeus, I would just stare at the ceiling and sleep for the first few months of living there.
Zeus has the same basic structure as Caesar and Pharaoh. You build houses for citizens, you use those citizens to fill a labor pool, and you can employ that labor pool to create goods, manage your buildings, perform acts of culture, and so on. However, Zeus removes a lot of the restrictions that Caesar and Pharaoh have on designing cities. There is no longer a local labor requirement, and water fountains can be built anywhere. That means that Zeus involves somewhat less of a challenge in determining where on a map you should optimally build your city, but that also means you have more freedom in designing your cities, which I personally enjoy. And on top of that, the maps are typically much larger than what you see in Caesar and Pharaoh, so with these fewer restrictions comes the ability to really take advantage of these large swaths of land. That doesn't mean there are no challenges, however. Because you have more space to work with, goods distribution can get tricky, which is part of why I struggled with aspects of this game as a kid.
It came to the point where I had a perfect housing district plan written down in my notebook, down to each square. House there, agora here, and then I had to throw it right out the window as Poseidon introduced the cursed circles of Atlantis as its main map.
Fortunately, with Zeus, they overhauled the management panel, so it's much easier to see how much of a good you have and to micromanage where these goods end up in your city. Additionally, you finally have one way to get rid of excess goods, by foisting them off on your neighbors. It's silly, but sometimes when you have 60 jars of olive oil languishing in your stock, the best way to get rid of them is to start throwing them at everyone around you, including your enemies, which can lead to some entertaining messages from them. Zeus also gets rid of the nebulous numbers you need to meet in order to complete each mission. Instead, you have a more concrete set of goals, such as a population goal, a goal to produce a certain amount of a good in a single year, and so on. I much prefer this. Zeus also makes some improvements to combat. By building a palace, you can recruit the locals to serve in your army, but since they're just a bunch of rabble, all they can do is throw rocks at the enemy. This can be effective, but usually only if you have a very large population. In order to make more advanced soldiers, you have to build elite houses, which are much more demanding to upkeep and upgrade. You also have to make armor and, if you'd like horsemen, and trust me, you'd like horsemen, horse ranches to supply your soldiers. The combat itself still isn't that interesting, but the need to build elite houses at least adds a new dimension to the city building that can be challenging and fun. Oh, and you can also bribe enemies to leave you alone now, which, is probably a broken mechanic considering that when you become good at this game, it is very easy to become absurdly rich. But frankly, I'm pretty okay with that considering that combat just isn't all that great.
The elite housing also changed up the city planning quite a bit. In Pharaoh, for example, it was all one progression, so at one point if you pampered your populace enough, they would become the nobles and stop working. Which, a bit of a dick move if you didn't know that in advance. In Zeus you always know what you're standing at, so that's nice. And hey, animated horses in the stables, yay!
The horses are truly adorable. However, these aren't the biggest changes that Zeus makes to the city building formula. No, the biggest and best thing that Zeus does is actually make religion fun. The devs leaned hard into the whole mythology aspect of Zeus. As with Greek myths, each city has gods that favor the city and gods that hate the city. You can build sanctuaries to the gods that like you, which will prompt these gods to take up residence in your city and provide you with a myriad of benefits that depend on the god. For example, I mentioned that Apollo is one of the most useful gods in Zeus. That's because if you worship Apollo, he'll increase the health and culture stats across the city. You'll gain access to the Oracle, which allows you to look into the future from time to time to see upcoming events and requests. And on top of that, Apollo will flatten any monsters that come to destroy your city.
Unfortunately, this is a video game, so there is a numeric tier list for gods. Building a temple to Zeus is an instant win button since he's the strongest, and once you figure out the exact hierarchy, it kinda takes the pleasure away from watching the deities duke it out.
Yeah. About the Rock'em Sock'em deities, remember how I mentioned that there will also be gods that hate your city? Sometimes they'll show up to attack you. Hopefully it's not Poseidon when the only way to get food is by building fishing docks, and the only way to trade is by sea, and all sea trade shuts down for like 6 months after Poseidon shows up.
Boy, it sure would be a dick move if that was the exact structure of one mission in the game.
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely still not bitter about that exact scenario. Or instead, sometimes the gods will send monsters to attack you. Monsters you'll probably recognize from mythology, like the Kraken, Talos, or Medusa. And yes, Medusa will turn whatever townspeople she comes across into stone. There are 3 ways to get rid of an attacking monster. 1. Build a sanctuary to Apollo. The game rarely gives you this option. 2. Throw a ton of soldiers at the monster until it finally dies. I've never actually tried this one.
Wait, does that really work? I just always assumed they would get dabbed on. Now I feel the need to reinstall the game, shit.
My brother did once. He said it took him like several in-game years and a lot of casualties. Not worth it, in my opinion. Or you can convince a hero to come to your city and kill the monster. Some heroes, like Hercules, are easy to lure to your city. Just build some gyms and give him some wine and he's set. Other heroes, like Perseus, want you to build sanctuaries before they'll come to your city. Sanctuaries take a really long time to build. That means you'll have to put up with the monster killing your citizens and sometimes cutting you off from tracts of land you need in order to complete your missions for long periods of time. And you can't choose which hero to summon. It all depends on which monster is attacking your city. For example, Medusa in town? Well then, Perseus is your man. After all, he's the one that killed her in the myth with his shiny shield. Good luck building those 2 sanctuaries to get him. It can be so cruel! I love it!
Theseus in general can get replaced along with his ship. Bastard requires walls around his sanctuary and high aesthetics levels as well. What a pons.
But mythology bleeds into almost every aspect of the game. For example, in addition to interacting with very real Greek cities, you'll also have dealings with centaurs and Amazons. The goals for a given mission will often involve a quest that a god wants you to complete. Some campaigns also involve you reenacting famous Greek myths, such as assisting Hercules in performing his labors or participating in the Trojan War. Your citizens also provide you with dialogue if you right-click on them, and it often delightfully references mythology. And yet the game is still very much steeped in history. For example, in many of the missions, you'll be allowed to participate in the Olympic Games, and winning them not only raises your reputation in the eyes of other cities, it allows you to host the Olympic Games in the future.
While fun, I think they screwed up in one aspect of this by awarding the winner with a special one-use statue, which looks like a boring block of marble, but it's the best choice when you want to raise the aesthetic stat, people love it, so soon enough your city is full of these fucking ancestors of Minecraft blocks. I'm not a very aesthetics focused person, I press random at character creation, but it still irked me with monotony.
You do get some different statues if you fulfill quests for gods, but yes. Almost all of the statues are this weird pyramid thing with a head on top wearing a laurel wreath. The Poseidon expansion pack doesn't add a ton to this formula, except that instead of focusing on a Greek city, some of the Poseidon campaigns focus on an Atlantean city. Atlantean buildings use a different color scheme, replace all of the Greek cultural institutions with scientific ones, and allow you to build things like a hippodrome and frigate wharfs complete with Atlantean fire, which is kind of like napalm, it's based on Greek fire. But the most fascinating part about adding the Atlanteans into the mix is how the game world builds around them. In the initial Atlantean campaign, you found Atlantis, and in the course of your missions, end up slaughtering a bunch of centaurs not realizing they're sentient. To make amends, you create a pact called the Symphonia Ithacos, which decrees that the Atlanteans will never again attack except in self-defense. Side note, I don't really think this is a spoiler because all of this is described in the first pages of the Poseidon instruction manual. But as you follow Atlantis through subsequent campaigns, you watch as the Atlanteans evolve. Over time, the Atlanteans come to look down upon the Greeks as being a bunch of brutist hicks, and the Greeks similarly look down on the Atlanteans for being intellectual snobs. The Atlanteans never quite manage to make lasting peace with the centaurs, and they become extremely controlling of their allies and surrounding regions. It all culminates with 2 campaigns, one from the Greeks' perspective and one from the Atlanteans. The writing is genuinely interesting here because if you play the Atlantean campaign, the Atlanteans spend a lot of time justifying to themselves why going to war is fine, and eventually they'll create a weapon that will wipe out most of the Greeks. But in the Greek campaign, you'll see just how miserable the Atlanteans have made so many people in the region, and instead you steal the weapon and use it to sink Atlantis, which is, of course, the canon ending. What I especially love about this is the game does not explicitly tell you this is what it's doing. It's up to you to play these two campaigns and realize that you are playing two sides of the same coin. It's just, it's so good.
That's right, kids. You spent your childhood replicating the Fortnite dances. We spent it enjoying the writing intricacies of a budget strategy game with no central characters. We are not the same.
Hey, stop dunking on the Zoomers. I'm sure Fortnite has its own redeeming qualities, such as... I'm checking my notes here. Llama pinatas, and I do like llamas. I'm sure that's why the youths these days are connecting with Fortnite. It's all due to the llamas. Anyways, in general, I think the writing of Zeus is pretty stellar, and it's helped along by what I consider to be the best voice acting in any Impression city builder. Caesar, Pharaoh, and Emperor all play the historical angle fairly straight, so while their introductions to the missions can be interesting, they're usually pretty dry.
Fun fact, not the case in Polish translations. I think they are all pretty solid when it comes to voice work, and I am eternally sad that the GOG versions are in English only. Again, I'm pretty sure the translation's quality is a big reason why Pharaoh and Zeus are cult classics in these parts. Sometimes you're just tired of squatting at the B with your pals in Counter-Strike and you just want to see a city with roads that don't have potholes, you know?
Oh, that is interesting. Now I'm also bummed that I can't hear the Polish translations. By contrast though, in Zeus and Poseidon, everything is extremely tongue-in-cheek. As just one of many examples, the dialogue introducing one of the Trojan War missions involves Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite competing in a game show for the Golden Apple. It's delightful. And that extends to the fun dialogue your citizens speak around town. For example, if you have philosophers nearby, you might hear, "My advice to you is, get married. If you find a good wife, you will be happy. If not, you will become a philosopher."
Allegedly, a real quote from Socrates. Poor Xantippe. It's easily one of my favorite game quotes of all time, and one that I laughed at a lot as a child. And now I'm a philosophy major, so I guess Impression Games got the last laugh here.
That's on top of some great animations they show in the game, such as this poor actor constantly spinning in the theater and whom you'll sometimes hear asking them to stop the spinning because it's making him ill.
The theater quotes ringing through the town are great, especially because they have a flubbed versions. Has anyone seen my spear? How can I be a guard with no spear? Sometimes just because of that, "Oi! Anyone seen my spear?" As for the animations, I can watch the olive oil merchant slipping on his own supply only to catch it majestically midair for minutes on end.
I was reading about people's favorite Impressions games quotes, and someone noted that the "anyone seen my spear" quote appears in the Greek missions, but in the Atlantean missions there's a hoplite quote that talks about having an extra spear and how it's too bad that there isn't a spear carrier out there who needs one. I don't think I've noticed that before, but that is just chef's kiss excellent. The great writing even bleeds into the Zeus instruction manual, in which various Greek gods and mythical figures show up to tell you, Democritus, about how to build a successful city. The manual includes a Simon and Garfunkel joke. Man, I love this game. After playing the other Impressions games, I still don't have many complaints about Zeus and Poseidon. The biggest one I have is that it's extremely easy to accidentally sell all of a good that you have in stock, and the other games make it much easier to stop that from happening. Combat could also be better, though ironically I do think the combat is best here compared to the other Impressions games.
I would say combat could just not be in these games in general. Just treat soldiers like another resource to gather and export, without me having to whack some idiots with a sharp stick every now and then, pulling me away from the fun part of the game, listening to philosophers and the main square talking. I wonder if there's a mod that adds "Behold a man" to the game.
At least in Zeus you do have the option for automated combat where the computer just takes over everything. And I do begrudgingly admit that, with the exception of the two hardest campaigns, it is too easy to make money in this game. I think my record is something like 600,000 drachmas, and when you consider that the most money an army can ask for to bribe them off is something like 12,000 to 15,000 drachmas, yeah. That's it though. Frankly, this game has the perfection that can only come from the nostalgia of growing up with it, which is fine. There are far worse games to be nostalgic about.
Yeah, at no point could either of us approach this title on objective level. But I think that makes for a much more fun experience than just talking about how each building in these games work, or at least it is for me. Parents, if your kid is about to get their first history class, go get them Zeus. It's on GOG for cheap. It's either that or God of War games. The choice is yours. Last but not least, Emperor Rise of the Middle Kingdom. This time it's China. It goes back to the more historical approach, but with mythological flavoring here and there, like hero units. I guess you can't really do the Middle Kingdom history justice without dipping your finger into Romance of Three Kingdoms at least a tiny bit. Again, you're a governor employed by a bigger governmental power to build a city. Combat still sucks. I think it's the prettiest in the series, mostly because the Chinese have perfected the notion of aesthetics, which reflects in the gameplay as well. Feng Shui is a mechanic and you can use small walls to gentry, separate housing areas from industry and commerce. Gods are still just a menu I keep forgetting about, but now they take sacrifices in any type of goods, so they no longer clog up your warehouses, which is a good way of preventing you from being everyone's glucose guardian like in Zeus. Am I forgetting anything?
Pandas can attack your townspeople, which is pretty great. And unlike Pharaoh, where you cannot keep the frogs as pets, you can keep pandas as pets in your palace menagerie, so I'm glad the devs took my feedback to heart when making this game. Emperor has a lot of the same basic Caesar Pharaoh mechanics, but it also definitely draws from the mechanics of Zeus. For example, Emperor also keeps the concrete goals format from Zeus instead of the weird does your ruler like you or hate you right now numbers, which again, I appreciate. Combat is also slightly less terrible in Emperor because, as with Zeus, you need elite housing. Elite housing works a bit differently in Emperor, however. Instead of being required to make more experienced troops, it raises the overall number of troops you can have in your city. Effectively, though, elite housing affects your city building experience in much the same way. Oh, and you can again bribe off enemies, which led to a humorous moment in one of the tutorial missions that was specifically about teaching you how to create troops, really pressing on you. Okay, this enemy is going to come within a certain amount of time, make sure you're ready. When the army showed up at my door, I started freaking out because I had only managed to make about 3 soldiers and summon the combat hero at that point. But then the invading army asked me for 1,600 monies when I had about 16,000, so I just paid them off. The game treated it like a win. It was not a win.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that mechanic from Zeus. Doesn't work when the campaign needs you to invade someone, but man, is it nice to just focus on the economy and pay the invaders off. I wonder if they feel silly doing that, marching for months to get a tenner each and then walk back. Then again, who am I to judge people who just got paid for going on a road trip with the boys?
The heroes in Emperor also work very differently from the heroes in Zeus and Poseidon. They represent another avenue for foisting off your excess goods. Basically, every month you can yeet some goods off to a hero, where the heroes comprise a group of gods, legendary figures, and/or historical figures depending on the religions in your city. If you yeet off enough of a good to a particular hero, they will show up in your city. Heroes generally have passive abilities that benefit you in some way, and you can actually command them to do things, which is pretty neat. Apparently, once you get familiar enough with the heroes and their abilities, you can savvily use them to significantly help you with completing your missions. It's vaguely similar to the gods mechanic in Zeus, though there is more strategy here with which hero you want to draw to your city, since it's easier to get a hero in Emperor than it is to get a god in Zeus, but unlike Zeus, you can only have one hero in your city at a time. However, if you don't eat off at least a minimum amount of goods to certain heroes, they'll get angry and curse your city, and it's Pharaoh and Caesar all over again.
Why do you need 24 crates of pots each year, Cow? Do you throw them as weapons? Do you organize a potluck every day and you really hate doing the dishes? Why is my entire city's economy built around making sure you get more pottery than my entire populace? Do you just enjoy watching people toil the clay pits?
The game further provides the most robust diplomacy options of any of the city builders. It's still no civilization game, but you can send spies to check out other cities and even sabotage them. In turn, other cities can send spies to sabotage you. In order to trade with another city, they have to like you a minimum amount and also agree to a trade route. You can increase another city's opinion of you by sending them gifts, which, as with Zeus, is another way to get rid of excess goods. In addition, you can form alliances with other cities. It's not much, but it's a welcome addition here.
I feel like that was primarily done because Emperor is the first and last game in the series to feature a multiplayer mode. Fostering more interaction between players is always important if you want it to feel like more than everyone just sitting in their own corner with the same toy. But, as it usually is with AI in strategy games, it's deliciously easy to abuse the system. Bully someone for their resources and then invade them anyway to make sure they didn't hide a single rice grain from you.
I also want to make a quick mention of the feng shui mechanic since it's one of the other bits completely unique to Emperor. Basically, each building has an affinity for a certain type of land. Constructing the building too far away from its affinity land will decrease its appeal, and constructing the building near its affinity land will increase its appeal. The devs added this to try and force people to change up their building styles instead of just using the same tried and true optimized city block. In theory, if you do poorly enough with the feng shui mechanic in your city, people will become ashamed to live there and your world reputation will decrease. Though that's apparently pretty difficult to achieve unless you're trying to make your city an unbalanced doomscape.
Every time the concept of feng shui appears in games, I am infinitely fascinated by it, but I never get it. And this is no difference. I can respect all these elements and their spatial placing being important to the culture, but I also am the kind of person that generates clutter by simply existing within a room, so good key was never an option.
Also, I just have to say that as hilarious as it is that you can now wall off the undesirable districts to keep the appeal of your housing areas high, it feels like a bit of a broken mechanic. Ah yes, this house is adjacent to the dirty pottery pit that everybody hates, but our kind ruler made a wall here so you can no longer see it, and that's all that really matters, you know, out of sight, out of mind, right? Now are you ready to make an offer?
Hey, it works for real life. I find interesting how the games went from needing to integrate the bad parts of a city with the housing spaces, to not worrying about it, to actively separating the two by a line of stone. Though the walls also incur additional cost on expanding a housing district, so I think this at least makes it a bit more of a trade-off. Gotta commit to real estate choices.
In addition, I want to take a moment to mention the voice acting in this game, at least the voice acting from the English version. Not because it's good, but because it's incredibly bad. I know I made fun of the voice acting in Caesar, and I can't believe I'm saying this, Caesar has the second best English voice acting of the Impressions games. In Emperor, in addition to being generally flat, the voice acting is, as one review put it, borderline offensive. The characters talk in heavily accented English, and the same review noted that they frequently mispronounce Chinese words. It's a little jarring to hear in 2021, especially considering that the developers clearly took time to research Chinese history making this game, which is why I mention it so you don't go into the game unprepared. And the sound mixing in general is also just off in this game. Most of the time you can barely hear what your townspeople are saying over the background noise. Though, maybe considering the voice acting, this is for the best anyways. Overall, bad voice acting aside, I liked this game a lot, though maybe it's because it's the most similar of the Impression city builders to Zeus. It's definitely a good Zen game, and not just because Buddhism is one of the religions in this game.
The fact that different religions pop up in the missions in a proper order and appropriate ages is really cool. It definitely taught kid me what Confucianism or Taoism are. As for VA, well...
Will that be a shave or a trim, citizen?
There's just not enough entertainment here.
The destination for these goods won't accept them. I'm told they need more workers.
Rozpocznij swój trening gubernatorski. Najpierw musisz nauczyć się podstaw tworzenia osad rzymskich.
There are so many places in poor condition, I can barely keep up.
I like living here, but if I were running the town, I'd do some things differently.
Unemployment is a serious problem in this city. I hope more jobs open up soon.
Dojście do tronu faraona Diosera zapoczątkowało nową erę myśli, nauki i sztuki. W miejscowości Saqqara powstaje cmentarz królewski, w którym pochowani zostaną tacy arystokraci jak Chezyre i Kabał Sokar.
What is it you wanted, Mrs. Pericles? Ah, yes, here you go.
Who am I, Odysseus? How much longer do I have to travel before I reach my destination? And where's Calypso?
I'd like to smash the city we're paying tribute to. I'd smash it to smithereens!
How could the best actor in all of Greece live in a city that is subservient to another?
Szczerze radzę, byś się ożenił. Jeśli znajdziesz dobrą żonę, będziesz szczęśliwy. Jeśli ci się nie uda, zostaniesz filozofem. Czy ktoś widział moją włócznię? Jak mogę być strażnikiem bez włóczni?
Jak mogłem dobrze wypaść, skoro słońce świeciło mi prosto w oczy?
I'll never give my money to those corrupt tax toads who are puffed up on their own importance.
The fearsomeness of these invaders puts my mugging talents to shame.
Ever heard the word endangered? That'll be you when I get out of here.
Witaj w pradawnych Chinach, miejscu narodzin najstarszej cywilizacji na świecie. Przeniesiesz się w czasie o 4000 lat.
Yeah. As an ending point, I just want to say the spirit of impression games lives on. In 2021, a spiritual successor came out, Nebuchadnezzar, I am sorry for my pronunciation of this, now taking place in ancient Mesopotamia. I instantly bought it on principle and has some interesting ideas. You can map out the routes of your walkers, so crossroads stop becoming an issue. You can also precisely control how much goods you produce by just hiring more people at a single location. By default, they work at half capacity. At the same time, hauling goods across town is a much bigger issue, as it logically should be. If your farms are far away from your markets, you gotta build several transportation facilities on the way. One dude with a wheelbarrow just can't do it anymore, so that makes spacing of everything much more crucial. At the same time, I noticed something when playing this game on release. It's missing clutter. And I know it sounds weird to use that word as a positive, but hear me out. In every Impression Games title, you had specialist buildings that were there to prevent fires from starting or buildings from collapsing. And it seems a bit pointless. You gotta build them anyway, so why bother, especially if Crossroads RNG is no longer a factor, right? Well, I think I know why they are necessary. The walkers from these structures are a constant, so even the most distant mining camp gives off an illusion of being lived in. All the walkers in Nebi are utilitarian by nature. They move when they have to move goods or distribute them. So sometimes, especially in early game, it's possible to see the streets being completely empty, and it made me feel like I'm building a model kit, not a city, and that blows. But I guess it's also a testament to how even the smallest elements contribute to the feeling of a bigger picture. Like your favorite street food joint is a crucial part of how your city of residence feels to you, if you live in a city of course. And there is some comfort in that, I think. A comfort that makes this kind of a game, or just even this kind of approach to even looking at games as interactive experiences, near and dear. That no matter what place, no matter what age, there was and will be roads full of people walking to either get their job done or get meat and veggies wrapped in a flatbread. A collective heartbeat and blood flow of mass society. And then some asshole kicks out of your home to establish another tax office. Alright, that's it, that's the end of the video. Coordinating a project for two people has been a new experience, but I appreciate that. Please check out Playhead North's channel, the card is here, it's also linked in the description.
Hey, I just wanted to say too, thanks for having me. This was a blast to work on. I really enjoyed revisiting Zeus and then also playing the other Impression City Builders, which I really hadn't played significantly before this. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me. Now I need to go eat some bread so that I can make sure that this video does well.
And, as usual, our city would not be standing if not for its most illustrious patrons, now visible on the screen. If you can and want to help me expand my channel, boost my ego, really, please consider joining them. If not, share this video if you liked it, talk about it if you liked it, just let it spread out further, like a real urban sprawl. I'm running out of metaphors, I'm just gonna stop now. Next video is going to be either on an art game or an artistic concept in games. We'll see what comes first. Cheers.